I know we want to talk about CONCACAF in general because I think it's really important for us to cover the entire region because guess what? The World Cup is in our region, and it's not just the U.S., it's Canada and Mexico as well, and there's going to be more teams than ever before, so we're going to have to get real comfortable with having more than 4 teams in a World Cup as well as other teams that are going to be coming through and where they're at on their trajectory of development. But before we get into those CONCACAF stories and sort of looking back on managerial changes, player changes, and where those teams are at, looking at this tournament, a lot of our players are being linked to bigger clubs. Mm-hmm. And I know everyone wants to be like, well, how can they be linked to bigger clubs? They lost in the round of 16. Those guys suck, or those guys are inconsistent. These guys proved against certain teams and certain players,
just the
specifically England, specifically England, that they can compete. Now, anybody can be the best on one day. Anybody can have a great game. You can see somebody have their shining moment on the world's biggest stage in a World Cup. If you can play at most levels of the professional game, you could probably have a good game in a World Cup. One or a half. That gets people interested in you. But to compete like that against some of the world's best players, most highly paid players, the England national team is not what England was some time ago. These are players that play in their clubs. They're the biggest clubs in the world, and they're massive stars. And so who do you think within this team's stock is increasing to go to a bigger club? Now, separate that from club form because I want us to talk just about this World Cup. Because if you're a technical director, you're watching them at the club level going, they're young, there's some potential there. I want to see them on a bigger stage. And then you see them against England. Who to you is stock has increased and made them ready or more capable of going to a bigger club in the near future?
Man, I think I'll say Christian Pulisic. His stock went up. And for Chelsea, they've always looked at him as kind of a luxury, somebody who is in the rotation, not somebody who they're going to start and play and build and be the guy. So I think stock way up. I think Timothy Weah, stock way up. I think Yunus Musa, stock way up. And those 3 in particular, I think Tyler Adams, yes, he went to Leeds United. He's proving himself. He's playing every game. Remember when there was all these questions about his health? Not anymore. How much ground he covered, the tackles, how important he was. I mean, I think it's
who's that? Who's that? You just mentioned
Tyler Adams.
Yeah,
just a gamer and just an incredible captain. So we don't have to worry about a captain or a leader for the next 4 years. I think Serginho Dest stock went up, and
I still don't think Milan's the right club for him. I think that's a tough thing for a young guy because you're making so much money that you want to make as close to a lateral or vertical move as possible. And they've just got so much depth that it's going to be hurtful. But hopefully this has increased the interest in him when the window opens for him to find the right place. Because he was another one that I was just like, man, will he always be like the potential that we hope he can be because he's got nasty feet, or can he do it consistent? He was one that I was like, start him every game.
I would say this, though. What's not to say that his move to AC Milan has helped him to be at this level? Because
I don't disagree with that move for sure.
So I just hope that he gets more playing time at Milan. With that being said, but there is a lot of players that took a positive step more so than a negative step, into almost to a detriment because we had to heavily rely on them. No rotation, we didn't have much depth, and I think. When you look at the roster, it was almost as if Greg was going into it with, I'm only going to use these 14 players or so.
Yeah, I'm
going to depend on these 14 players, and the rest is just brought in to make the group strong and fill a void into training and kind of being there. But there are some players that you knew weren't going to play, and those spots could have been used by somebody who could actually make an impact if you had to go to Plan B. Right, or Plan C, which we needed to do in the Netherlands game.
Yeah. So thinking about attackers, Josh Sargent, did his stock increase on the club stage? When I think about Timo Weah, did his stock increase? Because it's really hard to isolate these guys from their club form, right, at times, because you go, well, I know Serginho Dest is probably going to go back and not play, or I know Christian Pulisic, but we're talking about opportunities where clubs have now been able to say, this person's going to cost a lot of money. I haven't seen it yet because maybe their club situation isn't great, but now they've proven that they can compete. They've shown the upside that they have. And when you think about the potential of this young squad, what was it, the second youngest squad in the World Cup? When you talk about the potential of this group, it's incredible, you know. And now they've got to go for 12 months of the year or 11 months of the year and prove that at the club level to continue growing, because that's where the real growth is going to happen. It's just, I think this World Cup has shown that this isn't just like a gimmick or that it's not hopeful. Like, we've got some absolute ballers in this national team in a way that this national team has never had, and at an age that we've never even gotten close to.
Yeah, I'm curious where you think our defensive players lie right now in terms of upside for the next cycle. Who do you see staying? Who do you see moving? And who impressed you with their defensive performance in this World Cup?
Serginho Dest was great. I think Weston McKennie is going to be the player that I think he's going to be, which is super, super crucial to the national team, but more in the vein of your Jermaine Jones, Michael Bradley, consistent workhorse fighter. I don't know if he has the super, super upside. Having said that, he's a starter at Juventus, right? Like, it's a massive, massive deal. But I saw like star power. I saw star potential in him that I'm not necessarily seeing as like the star of our national team, right? But I think he's a Champions League player, and he's a Champions League consistent Champions League player. But when I think about the defense, I don't see much upside with Walker Zimmerman. You know, I could see him getting in at a lower half Premier League club and using his assets physically to do well there. But that's not really where my where my interests lie. I think Robinson has upside. I still worry about the things in his game that I am critical of. I think can be developed, right? Picking and choosing the moments to go forward. But his willingness to go forward, his willingness to track back, his willingness to defend hard, those are all unbelievable baselines, right? And now you can actually, if he can get in the right place that they're going to hone and shape him, not to say he's not doing that at Fulham, because for sure he is, to be more clinical in his crosses, to be better in his passing, to pick and choose his moments of when to have a change of speed and when to slow the game down a little bit. Those are all things that I think are going to make him even better. Then I think about Chris Richards, and I think about Robinson, the center backs. I think about Mark McKenzie, who's in an unbelievable run of form right now. We haven't seen that performance for the national team, so I still think that there's a little bit of a gap there. In the same way that I talked about Cameron Carter-Vickers or Eric Palmer-Brown, where there's still that, like, almost like they want to earn their stripes and they want to prove themselves, but they haven't really figured out, like, how do I take the national team? How do I take my club form and then do it at the national team level? And that's a big difference, right? There were lots of times that I was in the national team where I was like, I'm nowhere near who I am when I'm with my club. I'm nowhere near as comfortable. Maybe the game's a little too fast, or maybe I just feel a little insecure. And I think there's a gap there.
Looking for me, or playing to my strengths.
The game's faster, guys. Yeah, exactly. Like, you don't have the same rhythm of things, like all of that type of stuff. And it does have a little bit of that dog eat dog at times when you're in the national team, even though it is that brotherhood on the men's side for sure. But when I think about those guys, there's a lot of upside left in them. And then Austin Trusty, who's proven to be taking pretty big leaps and bounds in terms of his development. I think there is a new belief, if you're a player that's 17, 18 right now, that you can get into the national team at 19 after being a pro for 1 year, or 20 after 2 years of being a pro, or that you can have a Brendan Aronson trajectory if you're a defender. And so I'm looking to the future of our national teams, the 17s, the 18s, the 20s, to see who's going to be the next player. And I think we should have an episode soon on who is coming through the pipeline, your Kevin Paredes, your other players that are going to bolster up and really make us a more dynamic type of national team. And again, having bigger players playing at bigger clubs. I mean, what's your thought on the defense as well?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Serginho Dest and Nancy Robinson will be there for the next cycle. Chris Richards, I think, will be there for the next cycle as long as he can get healthy and find playing time. I think this year was always about growth and adapting, and then you hope that under Patrick Vieira, he finds time and is able to play. Austin Trusty has been awesome with Birmingham. Can he convert that into a move with Arsenal, or at least staying with Arsenal, getting playing time, being on the depth chart, or getting loaned to a first team in a different league, in the Bundesliga, in Belgium, in Denmark, somewhere where he's going to play consistently on a first team, and maybe in Europe. I think that would be beneficial for him. But
by the way, this is a complete side note, but I don't want to forget. Do you think Folarin Balogun could have been the 9 for us in this tournament? Like the 9 that we hope to have? I mean, he's in the top 3 or 4 in the French league right now for goals.
Yeah, I mean, I would have loved to see him first with the group. So I couldn't say he would have been the answer. He has quality, better than our depth pieces, that's for sure. Would he have been able to fill the void that we needed in terms of a 9 who's going to be consistent and a threat and score goals? I don't know, but I do know what he possesses. It's more than what we had in our depth chart. So I saw a comment from Keyshawn. What about Daryl DK? What does he have to do? He has to work on his first touch. His first touch isn't international quality yet. I know I was really hyped. I watched him in college. I watched him in MLS in his first couple of years with Orlando City. He makes that move to the championship and just scores goals for fun. But he needs to work on his first touch. His first touch let him down. And if you saw him in the Gold Cup, his performance in the Gold Cup, it wasn't at the standard you need, but that's not to say he can't get there. So as long as he can just continues to work on his first touch, I think his movement is good and his finishing has drastically improved. But that first touch is key. Holding up the ball and when players play into your feet. Once he does that, then he can be effective with the national team.